right, so welcome to another episode of the Deals for Dentists podcast. And today, zooming in from St. Louis is Rob Bertman. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric. Good to be here.
So Rob is from Student Loan Planner, and if you go to dealsfordentist.com, you'll find their promo offer of get an additional 6 months of follow-up support with every custom student loan plan. So that's awesome. So Rob, you are a CFA and a CFP, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, so I usually start with some hard-hitting journalism questions. So I'm going to start with, what does a CFA and CFP mean, and how do I get those at the end of my name?
Sure. Well, let's start with the CFP. That's probably the more common one. So it stands for Certified Financial Planner. So most investment advisors or anyone who does any type of financial planning will have the CFP is like the extra designation that gets you there. And studying for it usually takes about a year. And if you have another designation, like you're an attorney or another like a CPA or something, you can forego the training. And then you study for it. And it takes you through all the different areas of financial planning, from investments, tax planning, estate planning, cash flow, all that stuff. So it's probably the most practical certification in the financial industry. And to me, it's a must for anyone who wants to do this kind of thing. So to do any type of financial planning. That one's pretty straightforward. The CFA, that's a Chartered Financial Analyst designation. So this was harder to get. You have to pass 3 levels, and the levels are given once or twice a year. And the pass rate on these tests is like extremely low. Now, this is specific for anyone who wants to get into like securities analysis, business analysis. If you're going to be like a portfolio manager or manage investments, the CFA is the thing that prepares you for that. So it takes you through, valuation of assets, valuation of companies. Gosh, I can't even remember. It's been so long since I've taken it. But anyway, that's what the CFA is. That one's much harder to get.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, tell me about your journey in the dental business and how you got involved with Student Loan Planner and helping dentists.
Yeah. So I guess it was the end of 2017. So about 3 years ago, a little bit more than 3 years ago. I was working in a co-working space, helping people with budgets. My background is in financial advising and investment management, securities analysis. And this guy, Travis Hornsby, the founder of Student Loan Planner, and I were just kind of talking, and he had just started the company a year prior in 2016. And his goal was to help people with 6-figure student debt find the best ways to pay back their student loans. He's a CFA also. He used to be a bond trader at Vanguard. And so he has a background in, he's like a spreadsheet whiz and sort of an analyst junkie. And what we found is student debt is, the rules of engagement with it are totally different than any other kind of debt. It's not as simple as, debt snowball or debt avalanche, organizing it by smallest debt to largest debt or highest interest rate to lowest interest rate, paying it off in full. Because there's income-driven repayment, because there is, loan forgiveness, then it makes the calculation more complicated. So he and I hooked up about in 2017 and realized that dentists, obviously, and dental specialists, orthodontists, endodontists, periodontists, and pediatric dentists, everything, pretty much have the highest average student debt of most other people out there, even compared to doctors, compared to chiropractors, veterinarians. Dentists have a real big student debt burden. So most of them that we work with, I think the average dental debt is around 400,000. And we've done literally hundreds of one-on-one consults with dentists. So now dentists also have interesting things, because the like residency for a specialty, sometimes they don't pay, sometimes they do. And then you have practice ownership, which is, pretty secure and a stable way to dramatically increase earnings of dentists versus associate dentists. And so rather than focusing on, let's just generally talk about people with 6-figure student debt, understanding that dentists have very specific repayment strategies that they can use based upon like the career they can take. Let's deep dive and figure out how to best help them.
Okay. Yeah, because student debt it's such a monster hanging over dentist shoulders every day. And like you said, the average debt now is $400,000. And then, if you add in, you have a family, you have kids, you have a house, and then you want to buy a practice, or you bought a practice, you're easily into the 7 figures. So it is very complex and very scary for a lot of dentists out there. Um, so is timing everything? Because, when I get out of school, this is back in '02, I came out with, I think, about $250,000 worth of debt. Um, and I totally maxed out my federal loans, but I locked in a rate that was, I believe, 1.875%. So I locked that in for 30 years. This is back in 2002.
Mhm.
So for me, that timing of that low interest rate worked out. So is really timing everything when it comes to student loans?
Well, it's sort of I would say yes and no. I would say that it back when you graduated, there wasn't really this income driven repayment option available with forgiveness. So the only thing you could do is lock in a low interest rate and pay it back in full. But now there's all sorts of options for new dental grads or even anyone who's graduated in the last 10 years where they can hop on an income driven repayment plan. So their payments, instead of thinking of it like a loan payment, think of it more like a tax. So the payments are based upon how much they make, not based upon how much they owe, and then pay for a certain number of years. And at the end, whatever's left over gets forgiven. And under the current rules, you get taxed on that. So, like for example, right now we're at historically low rates again, and
Mhm.
we haven't heard any refi rates down in like the ones, but for dentists, they're getting in the twos and threes for sure right now. And when you graduate with grad plus loans in the 6+ or 7+% interest rate range, it's really compelling to like say, hey, let me just do this. But with dentistry, because there's practice ownership in the cards, because when someone first starts as an associate, their debt to income is so high, like you could have a 4-to-1 debt to income ratio, like 4 times the amount of debt of what you owe or 3 times. And trying to pay it back that way can almost be more expensive under the current student loan rules. So what's really important is that we want to make sure that we're designing a plan that's based around the career trajectory that a dentist or dental specialist wants to take, rather than having the student loans dictate what they do with their career.
Yeah, so the income driven repayment plan, so that's something that wasn't available when I graduated. How long has that been around?
So there may have been one around, but in 2007 there was IBR that came out, which was basically a payment of 15% of your income, 15% of your income. Then pay as you earn came out in 2011, I believe, and that's 10% of your income. And then repay, which is another one, came out in I think 15 or 16, and that's also 10% of income. So when you graduated, was sort of like payback debt the old-fashioned way. But also, even though you graduated with $250,000 of debt, tuition and the cost of education has gone up a lot since then.
Yeah.
Like I graduated college in 2001, so we're kind of the same era where college was expensive, but it wasn't exorbitantly expensive as it is today.
Yeah. So, and with that amount of debt, you also throw in a global pandemic where, new grads, young dentists, they're associating, they may have been out of job, and they have this massive debt, and they're, the owner of the practice had to let them go because they couldn't, afford to keep them. So it's scary. Um, Now, what about where you go to dental school and the cost of living? I feel like that's such a major factor that, when I was in dental school, wasn't really, I didn't even really think about it too much. But because I went to Nova down in Fort Lauderdale, the cost of living in Florida, is a lot cheaper than up here in Massachusetts. And also the tuition at Nova back then was cheaper. And I just didn't even really think about those things. I applied, I got in. There was, palm trees on the brochure. So I said, I need to go to school here. Um, but is that a major factor in where you go to school and the cost of living that dentists should be, um, you know, very aware of and factor that into their selection of what school they go to?
Absolutely. I mean, cost should always be a factor, but the education that they're trying to get should be, the most important a more important factor. But honestly, with student loan rules, um, it might be okay to pick a school that might be 50 to $100,000 more expensive, because it's based upon the current student loan rules. It's not all that much more expensive to pay back the debt.
Hmm.
And even going into the specialties like orthodontics, where you have to, accumulate maybe, five, six, $700,000 of debt. Even under those circumstances, there's still a way to pay back the debt in a reasonable fashion. So, dentistry is a very stable profession. I think most of the clients we've talked to, especially the associates, the ones who were associating, they were out of work in March and April, and they couldn't meet their production, obviously, and they weren't even getting paid a salary. But they pretty much came back to work pretty quickly.
Hmm.
And practice owners, they were able to cut costs because they can just try to take on as many procedures as they can on their own. Um, but with federal student debt, they've had the 0% interest and the payment freeze since March, and that's going to be extended through September of 2021. So that'll be a good 18 months of zero payment, zero interest that would count toward that income driven forgiveness. So I guess bottom line is, if you're going to like an NYU, one out, in New York or out in California, I mean, yeah, the debt you could rack up could be $150,000, $200,000 more than if you're going in Midwest or the South or, anywhere else. And it is something to keep track of. Always choose the cheaper school as long as you feel good about the education you're getting. But at the end of the day, you're going to graduate with multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt unless you have like a rich relative that is paying for it. So that's just kind of the reality of going into dentistry.
Yeah, I'm still searching for that rich relative, on 23andMe, and I'm still searching. I haven't found them yet, but um, so because 4 years of Nova for me, and again, this is back in 2002. Um, so after I graduated Nova, I did a implant residency at BU. So I came back to Massachusetts. Cost of living was a lot more expensive, and my 2 years of BU, I think, was equal to 4 years of Nova. So it was a major factor, and I had totally maxed out my federal loans. So the Stafford loans, and I started to enter into private loans. Um, but I think if you have your heart set on a school, like let's say you got into Harvard, and it's $100,000 a year, go for it. But you know, all things being equal, I would, going back now, I would pick a school that is cheaper, is cost of living is less, because when you get out of school, I rarely have a patient ask me, about, either where I went to school. Usually I just say BU because patients have never heard of Nova Southeastern. So I'll just
Mhm.
say BU to make the conversation easier. But, if I went to school out in, the Midwest or somewhere else, it really, in the end, doesn't matter to patients. And personally, if I'm hiring an associate, I don't really care where they went to school. I want to make sure they're a good person. They treat their patients well, they treat the staff well. We all graduate as dentists. So, to pick a BU or an NYU, one of the, the more expensive schools, very high cost of living. You may want to rethink that and pick a school that could be cheaper and a cheaper cost of living. So that's my 2 cents there. But
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
what about the Stafford loan? Is that still a thing? Is that the main federal loan? Is that still called the Stafford loan?
Yeah. So there's a cap on how much you can take out in Stafford loans per year. But with dentists, you can go with Grad Plus loans and take out basically any amount for the most part. So I'd say for any dentists that are in or aspiring dentists who are in dental school right now, I would stick with federal debt, even though the interest rates could be higher than private debt because of the flexibility and depending on if they're going to be associating as their career or associating for a little bit, then practice ownership, or maybe jumping right into like a family practice or something like that. Federal student loans have the most flexibility, and you can always refinance after the fact. So um, I would say, like, yeah, Stafford loans are still the primary thing, but most dentists, that's only a fraction of their federal debt. They have to take out the Grad Plus loans in order to make it work.
The Grad Plus loans, are those are also considered federal, or are we talking private loans now?
No, those are federal student loans. Grad Plus are federal student loans, and so those are the two main types that we see most dentists have. Most dentists, because it's a stable career field and there's high earning potential and everything like that, most of them don't have to resort toward private debt these days. and we usually tell people, like, especially people who are going to have multiple six figures of debt, that keep it all federal between Stafford and Grad Plus. Don't really delve into private loans unless you absolutely have to, because those loans do have to be paid back in full no matter what. Whereas federal loans, you have income driven repayment, you got loan forgiveness. If you're a practice owner, you can even make the payments even better by, putting money away into pre-tax retirement to lower your payments and set yourself up for financial success in the future.
So as much as possible, try to avoid those private loans, right? Because my like I said, I locked in that great rate with my federal loans, but I'd maxed out, so I had to enter into the private loan world, and my rates were variable. They went up to even as high as 9%.
Yeah.
So I just, as much as I could, I started just chipping away at those private loans, and I'd send in an extra, $2,000-3,000 a month, whatever it took to try to chip away at those. Um, and that was a major accomplishment to pay those off. I still have the paperwork in my basement. I check it out every once in a while and kind of look at that, that last statement where it said I had paid it off. But that can be definitely risky. When you start to get involved with those private loans. So what about in-state tuition? There's some dental schools. Like for the heck of it, I applied to like North Carolina and South Carolina dental schools, and I even had this this big master plan where I was going to move into my friend's house with him in Charleston, South Carolina, and get in-state residency and
Yeah.
try to slip under the radar. Do you recommend the state school versus a private dental school? Are the tuitions a lot less, or are they starting to even out?
No, I mean, it makes a difference. So usually if we were to rank the three, it's in-state is the cheapest, then out of state public, and then private schools are the most expensive. And sometimes you get these other dental schools that are just popping up, more like private dental schools for people that maybe weren't able to get accepted into, more traditional dental schools. Those are the most expensive to get into. And those have the least flexibility of what debt you can get. So, again, if you have a good in-state option, go for it. If you have not a good in-state option, then an out-of-state public option is probably the next best to keep the costs low. And then private would be a last resort, unless there's a really, really compelling reason to do it, that you think your income or your life is going to be dramatically different by going to a private school.
Yeah, unfortunately, in Massachusetts, there wasn't an in-state option. It's three of the most expensive schools in the country. You got
They're all
Harvard,
private.
Tufts, they're all private, and they're
Yeah.
all not cheap. So, um, what about looking back? When I was going to Nova, I rented an apartment. I wanted to be close to school. Um, Looking back, would you have recommended? I know I was going to be there for 4 years, to actually look into buying a condo and investing versus renting, or is that too risky? Because once you graduate, you need to get out of there, and you don't want to be stuck holding on to a condo unit. What do you recommend for the young dentists out there, that, or the students that are applying to dental school?
Yeah. I mean, unless you're moving into an area where you can afford the housing and it's a rapidly improving housing market there, and it looks to be that way, then I wouldn't even mess with it, to be honest, because dental school is hard enough. And there's a difference between being a renter and being a landlord. And so if something goes wrong, you might have to, miss class or make appointments off schedule to like fix the heating and air conditioning, or to, replace the plumbing, or all this number of different things that can go wrong with home ownership. And so, and plus, usually it takes, okay, so what most people forget about with home ownership is that when you buy it, the buyer doesn't pay a realtor fee. But when you sell it, you have to pay a realtor fee. And if that's 5-6%, well, then you actually need to own the place for more than 2 years in a normal market to even break even.
Mhm.
And then plus with all the other hassle of home ownership. So really, I don't usually tell people to buy a house unless they know they're going to be in an area for 5 to 7 years, unless they're in like a booming market like a Charlotte, or like a you know anywhere, Denver or Austin or something like that. So that's just general advice. Now everyone's situation is different. If someone wants to deal with that, then they can, but it's always better just to make a phone call to the landlord and say, hey, we got an issue. Can you come by and have them fixed so that you can focus on your training and school?
Okay, so I made the right decision. Plus, every
Yeah.
apartment complex in Fort Lauderdale had a pool, a volleyball court, and a tennis court. So it was pretty nice.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I'm coming out of school with four or $500,000 of debt, and then I'm applying to a residency that like my residency at BU, I had to pay. It was just another two
Sure.
years of tuition.
Yep.
Uh, how do you factor that in? I mean, the return on investment, I knew I was going to be making more money per year because of the skills that I picked up in my residency.
Hmm.
How do you factor that in, into a 30 or 40-year career, whether or not to specialize and take on more debt coming out of dental school?
Well, I've actually done a lot of analysis on this for not only dentistry, but for the like orthodontics and endodontics and periodontics and everything else that I'm missing here. But um, it takes a while to pay it back. So let's just say that there's someone who goes to 4-year dental school, they graduate, they associate for a little bit, and then they become a practice owner. So whereas going into residency, you're going to have a couple of years there, you're going to have to take out a higher debt load, plus you're going to delay making money and paying your loans for a couple of years or a few years, depending on what specialty. So what like everyone is different, every situation is different, but it usually takes about somewhere between 10 and 15 years. 15 years would be on the high end, probably closer to 10 years from the time you graduate dental school for there to be a break even. So
Hmm.
graduate dental school, associate, you're starting to make money. And if you're going into a subspecialty or something like that, you're not earning the money, but then eventually you're making more and it catches up. So, but usually like it all depends on what you want to do. So if you just want to associate, you never have intentions of being a practice owner, then it won't be as economical. It'll take longer to break even. But if you're going to be a practice owning, if you're going to be a practice owner, if you're going to live in like a more rural, but not necessarily part of the country, but not in Boston, but maybe like 30 minutes outside of Boston, um, or not in like LA, but maybe in like more rural California. That's when we really start to see dentists and specialists incomes really start to ratchet up. And then if they're a practice owner, that's when we really see that happen. So anyway, it depends. If you're going into a specialty and you're planning to associate, it's going to take you a lot longer to break even. But dentists and anyone who specializes is going to make a pretty good living. They have been. There's always demand for dentists, and so it's almost always worth it. But you just have to realize that there's going to be a larger student debt burden, that it's going to probably take longer to pay it back, and so just make sure that it's worth it.
So in realist terms, as an owner, you typically make more money, which means you can pay off your loans quicker. As an associate, you're going to be making less money than if you were a partner or owner, so it may take you longer to pay off those loans. Is that really what we're looking at?
Right. So probably let me explain a little bit the difference of like income driven repayment versus like the paying back loans the old fashioned way. So if you're on an income driven repayment plan, you pay based upon your income. Your payments are based upon how much you make, not how much you owe. And with pay as you earn, you do that for 20 years. And for IVR and repay, it's a 25-year program. So you're going to be making debt payments for that amount of time, but they're very affordable. And at the end, whether your payments are high enough to pay down the loan or they're not high enough to cover the interest, and so your loan is growing, either one of those options is actually going to be better in the long run. And normally income-driven repayment works for people who, are they owe, 1.25 times what they're making or more. So like, let's just say you're an associate making 150,000 and you have 400,000 of student debt. That to me is typically a no-brainer. Income-driven repayment all the way is going to save the most money. But if someone has $400,000 of debt, they're going to be associating for 3 years until they find the right practice and they get the experience and get more skills and training. But then their income is going to go up to 400,000. Then it might make sense to get on the path once they become a practice owner to paying down the debt aggressively. But with practice ownership, you can do things to reduce your income, like set up a retirement plan and contribute not only the employee, but the employer contribution, take deductions for, legitimate expenses to lower the income, which so income driven repayment could work for that. So I guess the gist of it is, if someone is eventually going to be earning more than what they owe in student debt, then paying it back the old fashioned way is the way to go. And they want to get rid of that debt within 10 years or less. If they are going to be making less than what they owe for a substantial period of time, then usually income driven repayment is a better way to go.
Okay. So really, the best time, what do you think the best time to call you and, get a consultation? It sounds like maybe even before I even apply to dental school, that would be the most ideal time. Is that when people call you, or are you finding that it's mostly, kids that are in school or new grads? When do people typically get in touch with you?
Yeah, most of the time it's after the fact. It's after they
Mhm.
graduate. So I would say we do have pre-debt consults. So if you go to studentloanplanner.com/pre-debt and you're thinking about going to dentistry school, or then you would set up a consult and we would walk you through the best way to take out loans. If you are graduating or about to graduate, or have so I would say the best time to call is right before graduating, when you know what your first job is going to be. Because then there are things you can do immediately after graduation to set yourself up for really affordable income driven repayment, or like the best optimal strategy. But oftentimes we work with dentists who they've been paying for 5 years as an associate, and they're not really sure what to do. The loans are sticking around, they can't seem to make headway, and then they talk to us at that point. So it's never too late, but
Mhm.
probably the sweet spot is around graduation, but before starting the next job, the first job.
Okay. So if I'm graduating and I'm thinking about going right into private practice, give you a call. But if I'm thinking of going into a residency like a AEGD or GPR, that would still be a good time to call you.
Absolutely. Yeah, really anytime, but the best time is right before graduating. But
Yeah.
you know, it's when we take a look at it, we're not taking a look at the past. We need to take a look at the past to see what the best path is forward. But typically the past will just help us figure out whether it's more important of what you do going forward. So if someone's been has been on an inefficient repayment strategy, it's best to correct it as quickly as possible. So no matter what situation someone's in, they should always make sure they're on the optimal plan going forward. And so, like we've done, I just pulled up the stats here on my computer. We've done, um, in total, we've done, I think, 4,500 consults advising on over $1.2 billion of student debt. Dentists, we've had over 700 individual consults, and the average debt is 395,000 for the average dentist. And so that is people that are just graduating. Those are people maybe just before they start their extra training, and all the way up to people who are thinking about buying into a practice, but they're not really sure how their student loan picture fits in, or like how dental practice loans work with student debt and all that.
So do you also work with other health professions and non-health professions?
Yeah, really anyone with six-figure student debt, we help.
Mhm.
So our top are doctors, dentists, veterinarians are probably the top ones we help out with. But we all, the attorneys, chiropractors, pharmacists, psychologists, PTs, PAs, you name it. Really, most graduate level professions these days will require people to take out six figures as student debt.
Now, does your credit score matter? Let's say I have a poor credit score. I made some bad decisions before going to dental school. I'm applying for dental school and to try to get loans. Does your credit score matter, or is that where a cosigner comes in? How does that work?
It doesn't matter as much as people think it does, especially for dentistry. In other professions, it probably matters more. But in dentistry, because it's a pretty solid profession,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of stability in the field, even despite COVID, out of work for 2 months maybe, and then people are right back to work. And people have catching up to do because they have emergency procedures that they were putting off. And no one wants to sit with tooth pain. They'd rather sit with like a broken arm than with like tooth pain. um, so so yeah.
So, having said that, it's for the lenders, we're pretty risk, we're very low risk. Um, do we do they take that into consideration for our interest rates, or are we lumped in with the rest of all of the borrowers out there, all the students that are borrowing throughout the country in every type of industry? Are we lumped in together?
With the federal debt, yes, for the most
Yeah.
part. There's set rates. They set the rates at the, prior to the start of the school year of what the loan rates are going to be for all the different types, Stafford subsidized, Stafford unsubsidized, grad plus, parent plus loans and stuff like that. So those are already set for the year.
So even though, dentists are, less, we're low risk, you'd think that we would be able to get maybe a better rate than some other professions, but it's, it's all equal across the board.
Yeah.
Um, what about military programs? I mean, are those if you don't mind, being, deployed, it seems like a no-brainer if you can get the military to pay for your school and your housing and supplies. Are those still very hard to get?
I mean, no, I mean, if that's someone's calling and that's how they want to practice dentistry, then that's what they should do. Obviously, it's a major sacrifice, and for those who want to do that, obviously it's amazing, and it's not a necessity to go into dentistry. So I would say, like we talked about, like federal student debt is the repayment is so flexible that I would only do something in that case if that's something that you really want to do with your career to give back, or to have serve your country. I wouldn't do it specifically to get out of dental school debt.
Okay. What about the rates right now? You said they're actually pretty good. Does that change, based on the economic situation? Does that change yearly? Is it set once a year?
Yeah, it does. So the way to think about it is, okay, so there's all these different types of interest rates, and student loans operate mainly off of LIBOR, London Interbank Offering Rate, and that is basically the rate at which banks lend each other money. So it's like super low because banks can usually pay each other back. Then what happens with student debt is they put, okay, let's take LIBOR plus 2%, plus 3%. So what they'll do is whatever LIBOR rates are when they set the rates, they'll then put that premium on for Stafford loans and then a higher premium for grad plus loans because people in those situations are usually taking out more debt.
Okay. And what about with the new administration coming in, the Biden administration? Can you predict any potential changes? What are you expecting out there?
Yeah, I mean it's well the good news is that Biden has pretty much laid out what he wants to do with student debt, and so he extended one of his executive actions right away was to extend the student loan payment freeze on federal student loans through September 30th, 2021. Okay, so that takes the anxiety away from people who are thinking we're still in the middle of a pandemic. I'm not ready to pay my loans yet. Um, Now there is talk of forgiving a portion of the loans, and like $10,000 per person. It seems more and more likely that if they do that at all, if they can pass it at all, that's going to be more targeted towards lower income professions, lower income people, maybe people who, if you wiped away $10,000 of debt, they would be debt free, and that's about a third of student loan borrowers. The average person who has student debt has about in the 40,000-ish range, or 30 or 40,000-ish range. So dentists wouldn't get much of a benefit from anything. We don't really see that they're them spending 1.5 trillion dollars to wipe away all student debt. I just don't think, first of all, the Republicans aren't into that, and some of the Democrats aren't even into that either. So it's more of like you know the 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 camp, the progressive camp that really wants to see massive student loan forgiveness. Now, we do think that there could be some student loan reform, and we're hoping to see things become a little bit easier and less penalizing, because what happens is when the federal government guarantees the loans, the schools can charge basically whatever they want because they're getting paid right away from the federal government. And then the student is on the hook to pay back the federal government. So the schools see zero impact from this. They're paid right away.
Right.
Um, and because of that, that's one of the reasons that we feel that tuition and the cost of education has gone up so much, is because of the guaranteed debt. Now, the solution to that is complicated. I think the Biden administration has a lot to manage right now with COVID, with the economic crisis, with the racial issues going on in the country and everything else that's on their agenda. That student loans are a piece, but we see that maybe being pushed out further, maybe into 2022 or beyond.
Okay. And what about the foreign students? Was that affected quite a bit, where there was a lot of, foreign money, foreign students coming from overseas, and they aren't anymore because of the COVID situation? Are schools getting affected by that?
It could be the case. I haven't heard much about that. I think what's affecting schools more is just the fact that a lot of them closed down. They're not doing in-person
Hmm.
schooling, but that's more for undergrad. I don't know if you can't really do that in dental school. You can't like do it virtually. I mean, you could do some of it virtually, but obviously when you're really getting into the technical of the procedures, you can't really do that virtually. So, but I think, so we aren't seeing too much of an impact from international people. It's more from, um, college enrollment is down because of virtual schooling, but that's more in the undergrad camp.
Yeah, I feel so bad for the dental students right now because they just can't do as many procedures because of the situation. So they're going to come out with less, clinical experience. So, what about the burn? I wanted to feel the burn with Bernie Sanders. I wanted to get free tuition for my kids. My kids are 5 and 7. And by the time they're in college, it's going to be like 100 grand a year. So did we miss out on the burn there?
Uh, well, I just don't see bipartisan support for that. And I'm not sure that it's even a good idea because I feel like let's imagine that you're a dentist and you're going to get, free dental school tuition and you're going to come out making, 100, 200, 300, $400,000 depending on what you decide to do with zero cost to that. You're going to see massive competition. Tuition would
Mhm.
rise incredibly high because there's a big payoff.
Yeah.
And so I think something has to be done. We're not really sure what the solution is because we have to do it in a way that's, with racial and social equity in mind, with, still providing people incentives and repercussions of and feeling the weight of taking out tuition and paying for something of value. Because at the end of the day, an education is a tool to increase earnings and have a career path that someone wants. And if the scale's tipped into something where it's not as economical to go get a particular degree. Like pharmacy right now is really struggling because there have been so many pharmacy schools that have popped up, and there's so many pharmacists out there that they're shifting people from full time to part time, and there's just not as much opportunity. So it makes the pharmacy degree less appealing from a financial standpoint. And if they just wiped away all tuition, made everything tuition free, then people wouldn't care. We'd have a flood of pharmacists. We'd have a
Yeah.
flood of dentists. So there are other repercussions to it. But I do think they need to expand it in certain ways that can help people that wouldn't normally have access to education, um, or that would really, like need based financial aid.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I have 3 kids. My kids are 11, 9, and 4. So
Yeah.
I think as parents, though, just like on a side note, we sometimes feel like we have to save up every dollar for their potential education. But in reality, if even the top income earners, if they're struggling to figure out how to pay for their kids' college, then there's got to be some sort of structural change because what's everyone else going to do?
Right. So I mean, what's going to happen? You think that bubble's going to burst and eventually, I mean, because something's got to happen, right? The tuition just keeps going up and up, and it's just, it's getting, it's pretty scary to think about, when our kids are in college, what it's going to be like. Um,
Well, the decisions change, right? I mean, when we were in school, you go to college, get an education because you're going to come out earning more money,
mhm.
and then if you want to go into grad school, it's expensive, but it's economical to do it, especially to become a dentist. Um, but eventually it becomes a financial decision, and then you're hearing companies like Google that are coming up. You don't need a college education. We'll provide our own training program. If you get our Google certification, we'll hire you. So I think, and then trade schools and stuff like that. I think you're going to see some more of alternative educational
Mhm.
opportunities come up. We do think there's always going to be demand for the Ivy League schools, the Harvards, the Stanfords, the all those, because people are always going to want to and have the money to send their kids to those kinds of universities. But it's more of like the mid-tier or state schools that might have to do some type of restructuring.
Yeah. Also, what I wanted to ask you was, after school, are DSOs now, are they offering attractive situations for young, new grads, like repayment plans? What are you seeing out there in the DSO space?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously DSOs are really growing within dentistry, and they are setting up a lot of loan repayment programs as sort of an incentive to attract dentists to work for them. At the end of the day, the way that I like to think about all these benefits. It's total compensation. So if you look at the total compensation, it's your pay, it's your student loan repayment benefit, it's your health insurance, it's all these other things. And if you add up all those costs, that's the total compensation. So a lot of times we just look at our take home pay and don't really think about the other things. So if you have an opportunity to work in a private practice, a non-DSO practice that is paying you more but doesn't offer student loan repayment, then it still might be better to take that job because you'll have the money to pay out to make the payments on your own. The other thing that dentists need to be careful of is that these repayment programs are still kind of in their infancy. And because student loan rules are so complicated, that these loan repayment programs that are set up, they're not at all efficient. So in other words, let's just say that a dentist, is an associate, they're making $150,000 and their payments on pay as you earn are like $1,000 a month. Well, the DSO might think they're doing them a favor by giving them $1,500 a month repayment. But what's happening is it's not ideal. It's not an ideal loan repayment strategy for the dentist, and it's costing the DSO more money. So the most important thing when examining whether to work for a DSO is the total compensation, but then having a student loan plan in place to say, what is the optimal way for me to move forward with my student debt? And how could this loan repayment program that they're offering fit into that strategy? And that's some of the work that we do in the consults too, is figure that out.
Okay, so can you talk about that consultation, what the process is? Let's say I'm about to graduate. I give you a call. Is this done over the phone? Is this like an hour consultation? Do you need all my financial background, and also take into consideration what my future plans are?
Right. So it's a good question. So the consult is, and you can book it through our website, studentloanplanner.com/help. And through that, you'll learn about the consult process, the fees and everything to go through that. And once you sign up for that, you can book a call. The calls are an hour long with one of our 4 consultants. Whether it's actually, we just hired a couple more, but all of us have advanced designations, whether we're CSLPs, certified student loan planners, CFA, CFP. So we're all financial professionals. So you book a call with us, and then there's a consult form, which will have all the information like your student debt situation, your marriage situation, because that impacts repayment too. Does your spouse have student debt? What other kinds of debt do you have? Like what is your car payment? Stuff like this all kind of fits into how we can organize the plan. What does your future income look like? What career do you want to have? That consult form takes about 15 minutes on average for people to fill out. So we get that consult form. We're able to prepare for the call. Normally, we also ask for their NSLDS file, which is on their studentaid.gov login. It's like a nasty looking text file with all the history of their loans, like what they took out, when they took it out, their payment history and all that. We analyze all that stuff so that by the time we get together on the consult, which we do via Zoom, not with video, so people can be in their pajamas during the call, but we just mainly use it for screen sharing as we're talking through the situations. And so we sit there, we go through an hour, we go through everything. We paint the picture of their student loan repayment strategy, depending on their career path or marriage path, or if both of them have student debt. And by the end of the call, they have a clear student loan plan that they understand the logistics of how to implement it. They understand that it's the optimal path and what their payments could look like over time, what their loan is going to do over time. And then after the call's over, we send a recap email with all the links that they need to do to get it done. Go to this website to change your repayment plan, or if you need to consolidate your loans, go here and here's a phone number. And then from there, we offer 6 months of email support in case people have questions along the way. They can email the consultant directly and get those answers. And then going through right, Deals for Dentists, they'll get an extra 6 months. They'll get 12 full months of email support from us.
Okay. Yeah. So, with this, it's so complex, it's so scary. I feel like for, a young dentist or a graduating dentist, to have that consultation and, like you said, create that clear plan depending on, the goals. Do you find that that is such a stress relief once a dentist, you've had that consultation, you've created that plan, because dentists have so much to worry about. I mean, you have your clinical skills to worry about, finding a job, this overwhelming debt. There's nothing like having a plan. So do you find that that is a big relief for a lot of young dentists that are calling you?
No question, absolutely. Because the rules are so complicated, and because it's hard to understand like the plan that they're on, they're like close enough, but just different enough. And just the whole thing around that you can pay based upon your income rather than how much you owe. And the way that student debt interest works and all that stuff, all that is explained during the consult. And just by the end, just knowing, even if they were doing the right thing, which most pretty much all the calls are something that we can do to improve the cost of loan repayment, whether it's dramatically changing the strategy or doing some tweaks here and there. By the end of the call, they have the clarity to know they've talked with an expert, they have a clear plan with clear steps, they know what the future looks like for paying back their student debt. And we also help them come up with tactics, especially for dentists, with we can talk through practice ownership and how that could impact, or how to do certain things that you can do, whether you're an associate or practice owner, to really reduce the cost of paying back your student loans too. So the clarity alone is great. And then also just the average savings that we can save people, oftentimes it's in the multiple 5-figure range. Sometimes for dentists, it's in the 6-figure range of savings by the end of the call, that they know that's, we can project that they will be saving by implementing the plan that we put in place together. But ultimately what we want to give the dentist confidence that their life doesn't have to revolve around student loans. They can plan their life and career and build a plan around them that will support whatever they want to do. And that's comforting for people to see.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Again, Rob, thanks so much. Rob Bertman from Student Loan Planner. You can go to Deals for Dentists and find the promo offer of get an additional 6 months of follow-up support with every custom student loan plan. Rob, thanks so much for joining us. Any last words of advice for the young dentists out there before we wrap things up?
And I appreciate you having me on. I would just say, look, it's challenging and can really weigh on people and weigh on you as dentists to feel the burden of having multiple 6 figures of student debt. But no matter what situation you're in, there is an optimal way to pay it back, and there will be a way to pay it back that will fit in without it having to be a burden on your life and your career. So not that there isn't work that has to be done, but there is a way. So if you're feeling the stress from it, if you're really unsure of that what you're doing is the right thing, if you're having trouble finding good advice because there's a lot of bad advice out there, just book a consult with us and we can clear it all up within an hour.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to hook up with specialists that specialize in dentistry. Like I have a specific dental CPA, dental lawyer. So like Student Loan Planner specializes in dentistry and the health profession. So you don't want to just go to any financial planner. You want someone that knows the ins and outs of dentistry, because it's such a complex industry. So Rob, thanks so much. Let's be in touch.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
Okay, take care.
You too.